Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Freshwater Stewardship Community webinar. We're very excited to have you for today's session. And if you are not sure kind of what's going on, we're going to do a full run through of how these webinars run and the different parts of today's presentation. We're very excited to have Julie Wright here. My name is Monica, and I'm the Communications and Fundraising Manager at Watersheds Canada. We're going to be your two people here today, but we also have Ty, who's in the background from Watersheds Canada, and he will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions during today's session, you can put those in the chat. We're not going to be unmuting or having a Q&A that way, but Q&A will be at the end of today's session by chat. So please submit those as you come up with them today. If you're not familiar with Watersheds Canada, we're a national charity headquartered in Eastern Ontario. We deliver habitat stewardship and education programming across the country. Have just a couple of our programs that we've run over the last couple of months. So in our top left, we have an education program that we ran in Buffalo Lake, Alberta with Buffalo Lake Métis settlements. We also have in the bottom left here a shoreline planting project that took place in Carman, Manitoba through our Natural Edge program. And then the photo on the right is our fish habitat program, which took place on a lake in Eastern Ontario, just I think last week. So we're very on the ground with community members of all ages to help protect Canada's lakes, rivers, and shorelines. If you're interested in following along with any of our adventures, getting involved, or accessing free resources, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and YouTube. And we will be putting in the links for those in the chat, so feel free to give us a follow. We'll also be sending out a follow-up email after this webinar with all of the socials for Our Living Waters as well. And so you can follow them on, I think it's LinkedIn. Ways that you can support freshwater conservation. Obviously, tuning into today's webinar is a great start. And then you can also support Watersheds Canada in really practical ways, like our symbolic adoption program. So we partner with different Canadian artists to target different freshwater species, both plants and animals, that benefit from our programs. And so you can make a donation and then you receive a 5x7 postcard of that species, which you can then hang at your home or in your office at your cottage, or you can also give it as a gift. And so you can learn more about all the different adoptions that are available at watersheds.ca/gifts. Finally, I just want to give an overview if you're new to the freshwater stewardship community and the webinars that we host. There is a giant back catalog on our website from the past few years that we've run the program. All of the resources are available for free. It includes webinars and education handouts. And these range from a wide variety of topics and speakers across Canada and across different sectors. So where you went to register for today's webinar, you can scroll down and there are 6 different menu options. And so you can look at past resources that are available by topic. And so if you want to go back there, we'll also be sending some more information again after today's webinar, but you can do so on our website. And we just want to thank our funders for 2025 for the freshwater stewardship community, which include Echo Foundation, Hodgson Family Foundation, Peterborough KM Hunter Charitable Foundation, and SM Blair Family Foundation. We'll also be sending out resources that are sort of topical with what Julie's going to be presenting on, which is through Watershed Canada's Planning for Our Shorelines program. And so we have different resources that you can use to engage your municipality in different restoration efforts. So with that, I'm going to introduce Julie. An experienced convener and network builder, Julie centers trust and relationships in all the projects she leads as National Director at Our Living Waters and as a City Councillor in Waterloo, Ontario. She is mission-focused and strives to always link the global to the local, grounded in the belief that caring communities can move mountains. She feels a deep obligation to the natural environment, focusing on climate action as well as stewardship and protection of groundwater supply, watersheds, tree canopy, and overall biodiversity. It is a promise she makes to her community and as an investment in her children's future. So I will pass it over to you, Julie.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping that everybody can see my screen. Welcome to today's webinar where we're going to talk about local water and local decisions. So as in my role as a city councillor, I'm constantly trying to link the local to these more macro scales where decisions are made, both in the international and the national sense. And so this has really guided my work. I'm just going to introduce you a little bit to me. Okay, so I grew up along the Grand River in the Waterloo region, and my family were farmers for 100 years along the shores of the Grand River. Um, I've lived in many different places in Canada. I lived and worked in Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Waterloo. But the last 15 years of my career have been really focused on building a more secure future rooted in sustainability. I'm also married with 2 kids and have a little orange fluffy cat named Foxy. And the other half of my life is spent being a city councillor. So I'm just going to show you, here's a picture of my city council. This was literally from our inauguration day, so you can see we're all feeling very happy and hopeful. That's not the case with all councils across Ontario. You may have seen news articles about municipal councils that are experiencing a lot of conflict, very dysfunctional, um, and that is not the case with our council. I have to say I really appreciate my colleagues and the energy and intelligence that they bring to all decision making in the City of Waterloo. It's been a real joy to work with them over the last 4 years. So this is us starting out, and I would say that we could probably recreate that photo still. This is me with my youngest son paddling on the Grand River. And so I am going to try to root this conversation a little bit in terms of my own watershed. Um, we were taking part in Canoe the Grand River Day that is hosted by the Healing of the Seven Generations, which is an Indigenous-led organization, a First Nations-led organization, community organization here in the region. And they invite people to come out and paddle the Grand River with them as a way of making new relationships, connecting with the natural environment, and centering the river in the community. And this is really incredibly important. So this river is Osi Kanyen'kéha in Haudenosaunee. It is known by settlers as the Grand River, and it connects a whole bunch of communities along what is the Haldimand Tract, which is the land promised in perpetuity to the Six Nations of the Grand River. And it's situated more generally within Treaty 3 territory, which is Mississaugas of the Credit. So this is a picture of the Grand River watershed. This is from Baljeet Kaur's paper from 2018. It just was a really lovely little illustration, and up at the top you can see how it's situated between the Great Lakes. We're really smack dab in the middle of the Great Lakes with the Grand River feeding into Lake Erie at the bottom there. So the source waters are up near Dundak, Ontario, and it is really, you can see in the very middle of that watershed is Waterloo, Kitchener. There's a third city there called Cambridge. And as a region, we're around 700,000 people, and we're growing to 1 million people projected by 2050. And so this is a lot of pressure on a watershed. And just to make it more impactful, we really rely on groundwater for 70 to 80% of our drinking water, and about 20% comes from the Grand River. So we are a water constrained community. We need to think in really smart ways about water. I'm just going to ask you all at this moment to just pop into the chat and maybe share with us where you call home, what you know about your treaty lands. Maybe it rolls right off the tip of your tongue. Maybe it doesn't. But maybe share just one thing about your local connection to the watershed. And while you do that, I'm just going to go on to my next slide. We can keep chatting while you're sharing with the folks in the webinar. So, in addition to my role on council, I am the National Director of Our Living Waters, and it's a project on the Make Way platform. So we don't exist as an independent organization. We are a bunch of projects that sit on the Make Way charitable platform. It's like a backbone for the work that we do. So we share a charitable number, and then all of us projects go on and do wonderful things. But we're small. We're very small and lean. And we tend to be have a very specific focus. Our Living Waters is a little bit different in that we are a network, a national network of more than 300 organizations and water champions from across Canada. And I just wanted to share our water declaration here because it's really important to connect water not as a resource, but as something that an entity that we have a relationship with. And this is how we think of it at Our Living Waters and what we try to foster more broadly when we're talking about healthy waters. One of the things that anchors us is this vision, our common agenda. So the idea of all waters and good health by 2030 is a pretty big, audacious goal. Takes a huge amount of work across, well, it's like 5 drainage basins, 11 watersheds, 165 sub-watersheds in Canada. And I'll get to that slide in a moment. But the way that we work towards our common agenda, the idea of healthy waters for all in Canada, is to, first of all, work on amplifying our network members. There's a huge wealth of knowledge held by grassroots organizations and any nonprofit organization or water stakeholder. Huge amount of intelligence held within this network and through its members. So we do a lot of work to write the stories of the network and to invite network members to write their own stories. And we amplify those. So it's an element of constant communications. We are the secretariat for the Canadian Coalition for Healthy Waters, and so we do work to promote federal water policy. The Canadian Coalition for Healthy Water, CCHW, is currently focused on 3 different things. One is modernization of the Canada Water Act. This is a piece of national level legislation that has not been renewed since the 1980s. It really needs an overhaul for modern times. And we work on appropriately funding freshwater. So our current ask to the federal government is $1 billion. And that can be broken down in a couple of different ways. I'll share that in a little bit. And then the third one is to invest in the Canada Water Agency as an effective and efficient agency in the best interest of freshwater in Canada. And we need that in these times when we have both national security issues and watershed issues, watershed security issues, as well as really extensive transboundary waters. It's really important for us to have a strong federal approach to water. One of the big things that we do is what we call network weaving, and I've jumped ahead a little bit here, but we really work to enable collaboration and collective impact in the network. And one of the ways that we do that is through network weaving, where we actually have a dedicated network weaving lead. That's Natalia Vono, who's on this call. And the real reason for this is that we need to be in touch with folks all across the country to understand what their needs are in a very place-based way. And then we work towards amplifying that and ensuring that we have a high-level view of what's going on across Canada. It allows us to connect dots to, if there's something great going on in PEI, then we want to share that with Manitoba, or BC and Alberta sitting next to each other, don't always know what each other are doing despite sharing a border. And so there's an opportunity for us to introduce people to new ideas and new ways of working. The last item here is the common agenda, which is our shared measurement system. And this is a system for tracking collective action. So we do have initiatives in Canada that look at water health and track how we're doing with water health. What we don't have is, other than this shared measurement system, is a way of tracking collective action. So, what measures are we taking to ensure that the policy and frameworks and accountability measures are there for freshwater? And so that's something that we've been stewarding for the last 5 years, and we're at this point in a renewal process where we're engaging communities on what they'd like to see in a shared measurement system. We do all this under the envelope of right relations. This is the idea of being in alignment and working in the spirit of reconciliation with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and to be a bilingual network. And I realize this is not a bilingual webinar, but a lot of the work that Our Living Waters does really tries to center French language so that we can make sure that we're reaching all language, or the two language groups in Canada. So one of the things that happens when you're working at the local level, so me as a city councillor and also as the national director of a national network on freshwater, is that you have these different roles and perspectives. So I tried to find an image that would indicate that you can wear different hats and still have a bird's eye view. This is the image I came up with, which I thought was kind of funny. One of the great challenges is that we live in a really huge country. And here you can see the 11 major watersheds here. I don't have the drainage basins identified here, but 5 drainage basins going to oceanic. And then we've got the 11 watersheds, and then, sub to that is 165 sub-watersheds. So the Grand River, for instance, would be part of a sub-watershed. This is an image from the Water Rangers watershed reports, and it's showing you just at a bird's eye view where the healthy waters are in Canada. So the watershed reports are really measuring the health of water. You can see across this sort of southwestern Ontario and into Quebec and into Atlantic Canada, there's definitely some degrading quality of water, and it's no surprise that that corresponds with the density of population as well. The blue and green are indicating either good or very good quality water, and the gray is we don't have sufficient data. That should be a wake-up call for all of us. This image should be a wake-up call that we have a huge portion of Canada where we are not adequately tracking water health. I had mentioned the shared measurement system. You can visit the Our Living Waters site to dig into this. We have 24 indicators that measure collective action towards healthy waters. And this is something that we can collaborate with communities on going forward. So we're really excited about this renewal process that we're stepping off into. So I talked about how water is governed in a very localized way. This is just a screen capture from Government Canada's StatCan site, and it shows you it's a one-stop shop if you're looking for the regulatory envelopes. And this is really important, I think, because it's hard to find what you're looking for. Just that fragmentation. It can be very difficult to find what you're looking for. So if you happen to want to dig into, Nova Scotia or New Brunswick or Saskatchewan, this is your one-stop shop to go and look at what the legislation is that governs water. It can be really helpful when you're trying to work towards a local solution. And this is a network picture of the Our Living Waters network, and it is also organized, it's color-coded through different regions in Canada. So you can see the green circles are representing our BC groups. We have some national groups with a lot of connections in the gray. There's Atlantic Canada in the orange. If you'd like to learn more about network mapping, Our Living Waters would be happy to walk you through what the possibilities are to better visualize local networks This is a tool called Kumu, and it's open to anybody can use it. And the little red lines show the strength of the connections between the different groups working towards healthy waters in Canada. As you can see, it's a really tightly networked group. So while we might feel like we're struggling, the NGOs around the country are really working collaboratively, and there are a lot of really important nodes from a geographic perspective. Okay, let's get into the local here. So when I was thinking about this presentation and working at the local level, so whether this is you wanting to get started bringing solutions to your council, or you're looking for ways in which you can work more effectively at the local level, I started thinking about, what are the 10 questions that one might ask? And so I've got two slides here that kind of go through a whole series of questions. And so I'm just going to go back to the beginning here and get started with just a few recommendations and ideas about ways that we can move forward at the local level. So number one is this question of how do you get involved? And so, you can join, obviously, an NGO at the local level. You can work in a tech for good sort of situation at the local level. For instance, in my region, Civic Tech Waterloo region, but there's also a bunch of different hackathons, data for good projects on the go. You can also run for council, whether it's a single tier or a two-tier government structure. There are lots of opportunities to get involved with local politics, and this can be one of the best ways to actually sustain concerted work towards healthy waters. This is one of the reasons why I got involved in local politics. I had this background in different aspects of sustainability, and I was working towards climate action at the local level, implementing the sustainable development goals at the local level. So while I was following the big international movements, I wanted to figure out, what does this look like when you actually get to a community and want to help community members with the implementation? So I ran for council. And now with this role at Our Living Waters, it gives me an opportunity to really dig into all the ways in which cities have control over what we do around land use and water decisions. So definitely there are a lot of different pathways here, but number one is to just step forward and start making connections with folks who are already doing the work. Number two, who is doing what? This is challenging. Like as I presented earlier in that very fragmented map and looking back at the Government of Canada website, different size cities have different staff capacities, and so this can be a really challenging one to navigate. I'm just going to check to see whether it's still showing on the screen. Yes, it is. Okay. City of Waterloo is about 160,000 people. We have highly trained engineering staff. We have a water utility. So there's a lot of expertise in the city. That means that you have a very sort of progressive place to start your conversation. Some other communities don't always have the same set of resources. In Ontario, we have our conservation authority, so that can be a place to connect, especially on all issues regarding flooding and land use. They can really provide some great advice. But I think, things are getting pretty complicated. And the division of responsibilities with an upper tier government can make it even more complicated. So in my region, for instance, the region of Waterloo is in charge of the drinking water itself. And then the City of Waterloo has all the distribution system. In fact, we even provide the distribution system to a nearby community whose groundwater was affected in the 1990s, and they're still working on restoring that. So that division of responsibilities with the upper tier can come along with conflict and personality differences. So those are all things that, sometimes you got to sit back and sort of navigate that. The other thing is it can also come with capacity gaps along the way. So sometimes, we just went through a period where it was really hard to hire people, and now we flipped into the other side of the job market where it's quite a bit easier to hire people. But for a while, there was a real gap in being able to fill engineering positions. It was a highly competitive space coming out of the pandemic. Collaboration with other cities is there for my community, but it needs constant attention. So this is from a councillor side. I need to be talking to my city staff and encouraging them to collaborate with our neighbor communities. For instance, this past weekend, I went out to a water festival at a creek in the city of Kitchener, and I talked to their stormwater staff. And it was a great conversation. I was able to share a whole bunch of resources with them and assure them that, yes, City of Waterloo will be there to collaborate when the time comes. Okay, so number 3 here is what planning tools are being used. This is the part that I have found the most useful in all the work that I have done at the local level. So I will go into a document and I will read it with a water lens. So I'm thinking about our official plan. How is land use being described in the chapters about environment? Are there adequate protections in there and guidance about land use and the impact on water, local water? There might be a municipal protected area. This is an area where it's got a natural heritage feature and it has protections already. So being mindful of where those are. In my community, source water is incredibly important because it's a groundwater aspect, and there are recharge areas that absolutely have to be protected. And so that's a place where locally people can be involved in the advocacy and the education and the learning process with city councillors, help really push them to protect those waters. Another tool, master environmental servicing plans. So oftentimes when development is anticipated for a particular spot, especially if it's greenfield development, a master environmental servicing plan can help to determine, what sort of stormwater facilities are going to be needed, what water infrastructure, but it's also an opportunity to look at what are the existing ecosystem benefits and can we get evaluation on them? What other, once the land starts to change, you can sort of benchmark and keep track of how those ecosystem services are performing. Another really great tool, and this one I truly love, is the asset management plan. So in Ontario, all communities, it's legislated by the province, must have an asset management plan. Waterloo has one of the best ones around. We're starting to incorporate all sorts of, outside of gray infrastructure or facilities. We're now adding in our library assets. We're adding in our parks and our tree canopy. And this is an area where we can start to track natural infrastructure and green infrastructure, and really make sure that we are tracking whether they are in poor, fair, good, or excellent condition. This is key. We have these annual reports that come to council on the asset management plan. This is a great chance to be involved with community stakeholders about, really making sure that we got our asset management plan in the best shape it can be. Other documents might include water efficiency master plan. The region of Waterloo ran on one of these for a long time. And now it's transitioning into a water supply strategy, a longer term, because if we run out of water, we have to build a pipeline to Lake Erie. We don't want to build a pipeline to Lake Erie. Expensive, and Lake Erie is already a fragile ecosystem. So what can we do to be way more efficient at the community level? There's also a water distribution master plan. So here's another case where, if we're using drinking water for everything, we're going to go through our drinking water pretty fast. Give you an example, I think in the City of Waterloo, our largest water utility customer is the University of Waterloo. And so there's lots of things where drinking water is being used where gray water could be used instead. So this is an opportunity to start thinking much longer term. And while it is expensive to build twin systems, it sometimes is the best answer to the long-term strategy. So that's another place where some good thinking needs to go into play. Stormwater master plan, for sure. This is flood defense at its finest. There will be hotspots in the city or low-lying spots in the city, and it's really important for city councillors to get out and talk to residents and find out where either the stormwater is backing up on a consistent basis. Maybe when the road needs to be reconstructed, you get into that infrastructure and you upgrade the stormwater main there. Also, it's a great opportunity to figure out where to target low impact development, rain gardens, various other forms of sponge mitigation efforts. I mentioned previously the recharge areas, so this is the source water protection plan, absolutely mandatory for a community like mine. Wastewater treatment master plan, again, what's being discharged to the Grand River? Let's talk about that. And then finally, this one has really picked up steam in the last little while, and that is it is actually energy intensive to clean water. So net zero water is all about getting to a much more energy efficient way of managing water. Okay, so those are some of the really big sort of guiding documents that I would be dipping into as a city councilor, that are guiding me, that are guiding staff. And it's always an opportunity to ask questions. So if you're going to, be involved at the local level, the planning phase of these documents almost always has some sort of engagement process. Get involved in the engagement process. Ask great questions. Read the documents. They're dry, but you can flip through for the good parts, the things that you're interested in. Okay, so number 4 on this list is what is driving accountability. It's legislation. It's risk and legislation at the city level. So we're always highlighting in council what is mandated by the province. I sometimes think of cities as being the branch office of the province. The province, we are all creatures of the province. That's the standard line we use in municipalities. And so it's really important that we are meeting the provincial regulations. So drinking water reports, those are annual. You can look through them. You can see where things are getting salty. You can see where there might be an issue. Sometimes there's lead pipes that are still part of the water distribution system. Those sorts of things get highlighted. Another area, floodplain hazards. So this should surprise no one, but of all the people who live on floodplains, regulated floodplains, only 6% are aware. So again, this is an indicator of how fragmented our country is in terms of water governance. In Ontario, we have a conservation authority. This has been maybe one of the biggest impacts from Hurricane Hazel back in the 50s, which impacted my community in my region. The city of Cambridge flooded during Hurricane Hazel. We got great flood defenses in Ontario out of Hurricane Hazel. We had the most successful property buyout program in history. We're still studying Hurricane Hazel for various different disaster risk and response measures. And it also gives us a benchmark for extreme rainfall. So for many areas of Ontario, for instance, it still stands as the record for rainfall intensity. You can use it when you're modeling a creek or a waterway that's in your community. There's provincially available data on that can be used. So if you want to know what extreme rainfall might look like, use Hurricane Hazel data. It's really great. And again, I mentioned the asset management plan. This is, local governments manage 60% of Canada's infrastructure. The asset management plans are really super helpful in making decisions. And once that natural infrastructure is in the asset management plan, you're tracking it, you're reporting on it, and you're reporting on it publicly, which is part of that accountability. Okay, going to what's missing locally. Oh, there's so much missing. So number 1, We do not plan for water at a watershed level. We're planning at individual municipalities. So when I talked about earlier collaboration with the City of Kitchener stormwater, yep, cities do lots of. They have MOUs and they have particular resource sharing agreements. You know, my fire department will cover this neighborhood because your fire department's further away. We provide the water distribution system to the town of Elmira up the road from Waterloo. Lots of sharing and collaboration, but this broader lens on watershed planning is not there. And beyond the upper tier government, we need to be looking at intact ecosystems. So let's look at the entire watershed. This is being encouraged, by the way, by the Six Nations of the Grand River, which is really, really incredible. So as we are learning ourselves as a community, we have this partner down the road, this First Nation community on whose lands we are living, who is willing to continue to help us think more holistically. So big kudos to Six Nations of the Grand River on that. We need to do way more assessment of stakeholder needs, and this has to do with, you know, upstream versus downstream equity. You could see from that previous watershed map that the big urban center is right smack dab in the middle of the Grand River watershed. That means that everybody downstream from us has lower quality water unless we are doing the work to make sure that we have the best systems possible. One of the great example of that equity upstream versus downstream, there was a paper written by the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority about equity. And for them, it was about, you know, Toronto's downstream from them, and so what responsibilities do they have to manage these sort of shared ecosystems? An understanding of ecosystem benefits. This is a big gap. So it's mapping, it's data, it's valuation exercises. It requires academic partners. We don't really have established ways of working with our academic partners. My community has 3 post-secondary institutions. And, you know, I think year 2 of my term of council, we met with the research office and we had a big kind of sit down with the University of Waterloo to talk about all the different research projects that might be possible, collaborations. One of the easiest ways to work is with my tax funding, and that is you get graduate students who basically work as consultants in-house. And I love my tax for that. So this is one area where we could be doing a lot of work. We could be cataloging who's done this valuation. You know, there's valuations, ecosystem benefit evaluations that have been done across different parts of the United States. Connecticut, Minnesota have done some good ones. The Halton region has done some really great work. I saw a paper from 2019. I'll be sharing some of these resources afterwards, and if anybody's really particularly interested in digging in on things, please let me know what questions you have, and I'd be happy to kind of curate some resources. So there's a lot of mapping and data and sort of the intelligence gathering side that can help inform decision making. And this is an area that is very gray, and we just, you know, it's sort of somebody does a good thing over here and somebody does a good, but there's no sort of system and collective work going on there. I'm going to move on to what councils can do. So this is we're on to page 2 of our 10 things. What can council do? So number 1, most members of council have very little awareness of water health, water infrastructure, and water governance. This is a huge opportunity, I think, for NGOs to come in and help with that learning. You can delegate at council. You can invite councillors to come out and look at particular ecosystems. When I first came on board at council, the Grand River Environmental Network invited me to come out and walk through the water recharge area. It's a protected woods. At the time, it was a little bit vulnerable because there were some local council decisions that might impact those woods. And that work was critical. It really helped us better understand the value of the natural infrastructure around us. Council's bread and butter is resolutions. When we want to ask for cooperation in a formal way, we put together a resolution at council. And the excellent example of this work is what's been spearheaded by the Ontario Salt Pollution Coalition, which gathered around the issue of our freshwater is getting saltier from road salt. And they put together a campaign around that. They have 19 resolutions mostly from big cities across southwestern Ontario, and this is growing, is picking up steam. And then once a councillor feels comfortable and is kind of well educated in it, they can pass it on to another friendly councillor in another region and just keep it going. So, we do get shared correspondence to our emails. We see these resolutions come forward as a chance for one of us to champion it and bring it forward. Work with your councillor to figure out how to champion some of this stuff. And you can work with a councillor to bring a resolution forward. That's really very welcomed, at least at my council. Provincial advocacy. So the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has an annual conference every August. I was at ours this year. You can delegate as a municipality at AMO. You might have anywhere from 8 to 11 different delegations with members of provincial ministries. It takes a lot of government relations legwork to get the meetings and to put together the briefs to make sure that all of your city representatives know what they're talking about. To create the case, but it's a pretty effective way of building relationships and bringing nuance forward in conversation with the province. And then my last talking point here is really about building the relationships with rights holders. As municipal councils, we really do have an obligation to UNDRIP, the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We are watching British Columbia do all this work, and we certainly have not made much progress. It's very ad hoc across Ontario, but this is an opportunity for us. And so our council has engaged with Six Nations of the Grand River and the Mississaugas of the Credit to improve that relationship and to get into the work of engaging with them up front, and it not being just about informing them of what we're doing, but asking them to work with us on various different things. And so this is a sea change for municipal politics, but it's so important. They hold so many similar issues that we do as municipalities, and yet they are nations unto themselves. And so we really, while we don't have the crown relationship, we do have the where the rubber hits the road relationship. And so it's really important for us to invest in that. So there's an opportunity to, if you don't have something on your council schedule, to invite the local First Nation to come and delegate at council or work with the clerk's office to arrange an education opportunity. These are great ways to build those relationships, and then it requires, a really regular outreach. Okay, we're into how can NGOs help at the local council level. Education, absolutely number one. You know what's going on in your community, and you can bring that to your local council. You might have to find a champion on council. You might have to find somebody who will lend you the listening ear or is willing to engage with you. But councillors often will help share that within a council if there's a good working relationship. Or they might share the work up the chain to the upper tier council. So you can do anything from, delegating at council. We have a number of different nonprofit groups in the Waterloo region who on an annual basis come and present their work from the previous year and the impact. Jane's Walks are awesome. A great way to, look at the urban infrastructure and really dig in with a local councillor. Inviting them out to do a talk around a park or a particular environmental feature, a wetland, and then obviously invite them to local talks by local experts. These are all, it's just, you're inundated all the time, but once you build a relationship, there's an opportunity to get these things to happen. And then also working together across watersheds as a collective. So this is really important. So just as municipalities kind of get siloed, so do NGOs. We all have independent mandates, and we're all working to fundraise and deliver on our programs. We need to leave a little time for, whether it's meeting up at a local brewery or distillery or, arranging for a meetup at a park, whatever it happens to be, sharing that local intelligence and being able to come together in advocacy with a single voice at important times is really powerful. So definitely making those connections across a watershed at the watershed scale. And again, that work of involving rights holders. So, building bridges with your local First Nation community is really an important part. Number 8 here on this list is how do we time it? And so you got to think in terms of election cycles, and you need to think in terms of budgets. My city does a 3-year budget. They do a 1-year budget and a 3-year budget that's tied to the strategic planning process of a new council. A lot of cities do a budget every year. We just don't want to spend that much time on it, so we are very strategic, and then that frees up our staff time to reconfirm the budget each year. But so we have room to make changes, but we're not spending all that time between basically October and February to go through everything line by line again on an annual basis. We're just back to the big ticket items. So you got to find out what your city's budget cycle is, and you need to do the work with new councillors. The other thing is the election cycle provides some really good opportunities. I know we're gonna run out of time here in a minute, so I'm just going to conflate these two things here. How do we get traction and how do we handle transitions? So traction is really about, using your voice, using local media, using councillors to educate other councillors, make water an election issue. So oftentimes during an election campaign, we're all asked to answer these different questionnaires. Work with a local media organization. Like if I get a questionnaire from the CBC, make sure water or some environmental issue from your community is on there. You can create a questionnaire for candidates during an election and work with a local news outlet on it. And connecting people to the watershed. So this past weekend I was at Creek Fest in Kitchener. That's where I was talking to Kitchener Stormwater. Great learning opportunity for people who live in the community who are by Schneider Creek, which is part of the larger Grand River watershed. And it was a fun festival with art and ways to engage. So these community events are really super helpful about building that place-based connection with water. And then the last issue being handling transition. So council is 4 years. People get booted off council. They don't get reelected. There's turnover in staff. So it's about creating succession in relationships. You have to be relentless. You have to really persevere on this stuff, because otherwise you don't get to yes. So it's really about building that social connections with the people who can champion and building the people power underneath. It's amazing what people power does over a 20-year period. It's amazing. It's truly amazing. Okay, I'm going to wrap there, and hopefully we can move on to some Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie. We have had a lot of questions and people sharing different resources and where they're calling in from. So there's been a lot of great chat throughout your presentation, but there are a couple of questions that haven't been answered yet. So we'll start with those. And if people have other questions, maybe they've been saving, now is the time to put them in the chat. And also, Ty will be putting in a survey link. So if people can let us know sort of your feedback from today. And then also, as we start planning our webinar topics for 2026, if there are any speakers or topics that you are interested in, the survey is the place to let us know. So we'll go off with our first question. And you did touch on this, so I'll just say it to you anyway in case you have anything you want to add from your presentation. How do organizations align themselves with municipal/county goals to facilitate partnership for projects related to watershed issues?
So at the council level, once a new council is starting out, there's you invest in a strategic planning process. This is an opportunity to make sure that that water is a consideration in the strategic planning process and that it's included in that strategic planning document. Um, it may take going out to the different engagement events. It might require you to reach out to your counselor and find out when the strat plan process is going to get underway. There's usually one staff member who's in charge of the whole thing. So it's, it's a little bit of a process, but that will help you kind of orient. And then you kind of have to also look at some of the existing planning documents. So for instance, a lot of our zoning and official planning updates were done in 2018. They went through like a 5-year cycle, and then we were doing an update. So when these documents have a shelf life, sometimes a planning document might be for 10 years, sometimes it's 5 years. I'm seeing more happen at 5 years because there's so many changes at play. You got to keep track of those, and the city will push information out, but I think one of the great things for locals to do is to kind of figure out what are the main documents that my city is using to guide this process, and when are they coming up for negotiation. And if you have a watershed board or you have a conservation authority that you can touch base with, they'll also be able to help guide you in that and determine what the documents are.
Great. The next question is about either disengaged or kind of vehemently opposed council. So if a group has been trying to engage a council for a long time around a watershed issue and they're getting a lot of either apathy or resistance, do you have any tips for how they can still keep going without feeling like either they're doing the same thing over and over, or maybe they're making the issue worse by kind of always saying the same thing and driving a wedge in between the relationship?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So number one, I would say that there's often someone on council who can be engaged, and um, you know, councils can have many personalities, and so you kind of have to figure out how to thread that needle based on the personalities, or champions in the community who have influence with council. That can also be a route. Um, I think about how you can be disengaged on a topic. I often frame water governance as an opportunity to manage risk and to get the infrastructure decisions right. And I can tell you that the engineers that I work with, they totally are on board with the risk and infrastructure framing. It's a pathway into a broader conversation about what happens when you remove ecosystem benefits. You are at bigger risk. It's going to cost more money. Like a lot of municipalities are having a shocking experience right now, having delayed investments in infrastructure, and now the property tax is jumping up hugely. They don't have enough money to build the water infrastructure, servicing infrastructure for new housing. I'm seeing councils at like predicting 19% raise in property tax. And this is because upper tiers of government have not been funding it. We have to apply for grants. It's totally ad hoc here, there, and everywhere, which doesn't give you sustainable funding. So I would really recommend try to come at it from an economic lens, from a risk lens. Water is the backbone of our communities. We do not have an economy without access to water.
Hey, our next question. So this person, their experience with the city, they find it's motivated to contain some problems. So in their case, it's cyanobacteria risks in their lake, but not in the rehabilitation of aquatic life, which they see as an open-ended problem and expensive. Do you have any suggestions for how they can help close that gap?
A lot of that is education. So sometimes you need to bring in the experts. Not all experts are helpful. So you kind of have to screen your experts to try to find people who can speak in plain language, who can communicate again what the risks are of inaction. And really, we've got lots of information now which helps to show that a dollar invested reaps, three, four, sometimes $8 to $12 in benefits. And so I think sometimes you have to make the economic case for water, even though it can feel like it's not um, true to your values, maybe, especially when we talk about, water being sacred, or, having a covenant with water, or a relationship with water. Sometimes you have to let the money speak. And it's a little bit of, uh, pound of, or what ounce of prevention, pound of cure. So it's, sometimes it's going to be a heck of a lot more expensive later on.
Our next question is for people that their experience with council when they talk about water quality issues, they think that water quality is maybe getting taken for granted or that it's someone else's problem, either maybe a higher level of government or our water is fine here, so why worry about kind of our neighbors, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, a lot of that goes back to social contracts that we have at the local level. And I don't think we're going through a very strong phase in terms of social contracts. We're not thinking about community well-being. We're often thinking about individual well-being. And so, this is where complaints about property taxes come from. Oh, why should I pay tax? Well, you know what? You're contributing to all of this growth and critical infrastructure. Like that's really what it comes down to. Um, so that can be a difficult thing to navigate. Um, and I think a lot of it is connecting the dots. It's a lot of engagement. It's a lot of inviting people to come out and see how the water is being affected. Water is so place-based, and sometimes it's a emotional argument about, your cottage, um, the quality of your, like, if your well has been affected and you can't drink your well water anymore, like that's a really massive inconvenience in day-to-day life. When that starts to scale up to a community level, like, this is what First Nations have been living with for decades. But we're also seeing it happen in communities who are affected by wildfire or the spring freshet. So, like, it can be temporal, and it can also be long lasting. It can also be temporal and then turn into a long lasting issue. So it's really about looking holistically at the water systems in your community and thinking about how it functions as a whole when you take one piece out. You all know this, but it's really about that education piece. Like, find the community champions who can help you make that argument.
I think we have gotten through all of the submitted Q&As. If someone has one last one, we can ask it. But in the meantime, Ty is going to post the survey link again. It is very short, it is anonymous, and it is very helpful for us as we start planning out for next year the topics and speakers. So if people are able to do that, that would be greatly appreciated. But it's looking like no last minute questions. So we'll stop here right at 3 o'clock and say thank you again, Julie, for your presentation and your time. And I saw Rebecca and Natalia in the chat, putting all of the great links in and everything. We will be summarizing all of that. So if people didn't get everything down, there will be a handout that goes out to everyone, as well as a recording. Feel free to share both of those resources widely. Maybe that can be a starting point for a conversation. And so you can look for those in your inbox. Anyone who registered ahead of time will get those. So thank you again, Julie, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us.